This is part 3 of my Stranger Things diorama, and today we're making Eddie's guitar. He was one of my personal favorites, RIP, so I definitely wanted to pay homage to him in this project. Here are some quick reference photos for you, and let's get started. I'm going to be using some lightweight basswood to make the guitar. I found a picture of it and scaled it to size, and I'm going to be using that as my template. So I'm just going to trace around the outside of it, and then I'll be cutting that out. And I'm starting with the body first. The neck of the guitar I will be making separately. And altogether, I'm actually going to be making 3 of these body pieces and then gluing them together so I get the correct thickness. So once I've traced it out, I'm going to start cutting it. And because it's an awkward shape, it's not the easiest thing to cut out. Also, I should mention this is the first time I've ever made a little guitar, so at this point in the process, I have no idea how it's going to end up looking, but obviously if you're watching this, that means it turned out okay. Once I have my first piece cut out, I'm going to use that as a template to cut out the other body pieces and then glue them together with some wood glue. And once that dried, I did end up filling in some of the gaps on the sides with a little bit of wood filler and then sanded it like crazy with sandpaper and files. The files were really key because I was able to really get in those curved spots and define them a little bit more. Now we are ready to paint, so I custom mixed this red paint, and I think I ultimately ended up painting on like 4 or 5 layers. And I do have to say I'm pretty happy with how the body turned out. I forgot to film how it looked before I added the wood filler and sanded it, but it didn't look great. Let's just say that. So once I finish up the red, I need to add the black crackle paint layer on top. And the original product I wanted to try wouldn't arrive until January, so I found this product instead. And this is my first time using it, but the reviews are pretty good, so we'll see. Now, I don't want to risk messing up my guitar because I worked really hard on it. So what I did is use the same red paint and painted a little piece of scrap wood. And I'm going to use this as my tester. This is quite thick, as you can see, so I mixed it up a little bit. And on one side of the wood, I'm going to paint a thinner layer because one review said that you might be able to get some more defined crackles if the layer was a bit thinner. And then on the other side of the wood, I'm going to paint a thicker layer, and we'll see which side yields better results. So I'm going to let it dry overnight. So this is what it looked like after it dried. As you can see, the thinner layer, there's like no crackling at all, but on the thicker layer, I do see some crackle in the thicker parts. So we're going to have to paint this on pretty thick. Definitely a bit nervous because, like I said, I worked really hard on this and I don't want to mess it up. So I taped off the edges because the crackling appears to only be on the top of the guitar, and we're just going to go for it. So I'm starting by painting a layer just all over the top, and then I'm really going to go in with it. So I'm starting to kind of glob it on instead of brushing it on like I did before. And I'm kind of patting on the product. And obviously I know how this turned out, and if you do end up using this product, that is my suggestion, to really like pat it on as opposed to brushing it on, because spoiler alert, it did yield really good results. So that's my hot tip. So this is what it looks like when I'm done. I'm just going to set this aside to dry overnight. And this is the finished result. I'm very, very happy with how it looks. There's a lot of crackling, and yeah, I'm pretty stoked. The only negative reviews of this product was that it dried really glossy, but for me that was perfect because I'm just going to coat it with gloss anyway. So just keep that in mind if you do purchase this product. But yeah, I really love how it looks. So we can move on to the neck of the guitar. I used a thicker piece of basswood and used my template to cut it out. I forgot to film it, sorry about that. But then I'm taking my X-Acto knife and just cutting out a little notch at the top of the neck. And then I'm just going to file it down to give it a little more definition. And then also use my X-Acto to cut lines in the neck of the guitar. And I'm just going to go back in and define those a little bit more. And these are going to be for the frets. So I marked out where the openings for the tuners are going to be, and I'm just going to use my hand drill to carefully poke out the holes. Before I add the metal frets, I'm going to go ahead and paint it black. And it was at this point that I realized the notch on the body of my guitar, the notch where the neck is supposed to go, was on the wrong side. So that was cool. I was actually really stressed out about it because I did not want to cut into this, but that's what we had to do. Of course, I didn't cut it perfectly, which was infuriating to me since I worked so hard on the body, but it's fine. So I'm going to use some craft wire to make the frets, and I'm just cutting it into small pieces. And then once I get everything cut out, I'm going to use a little bit of super glue to glue these on top of the notches we cut out earlier. Once they're all on there, that's what it looks like. And then once the glue dries, I cut off the excess. Now I'm going to make the tuners, and I'm just using that same wire, and I'm going to be threading it through the holes that we drilled earlier and then cutting off the excess. I glued the neck of the guitar onto the body, so now it's really coming together, and so far it doesn't look too terrible. Now I'm going to make the little things that are on the front of the guitar. I'm so sorry, I have no idea what they're called. I probably should have looked it up, but I think they're called pickups. I'm not really sure. But I cut out these little rectangles out of matte board, painted them black, and I'm just going to glue them on the front of the guitar using some tacky glue. I also made some little knobs. Again, don't know what they're called, but I just cut off tiny pieces from a dowel, painted it black, and glued them on as well. And that's what we have so far. Now we're going to move back up to the tuners. I created these little balls on top, I guess. I don't know. Not the best way to describe them, but I used a little bit of glue, and I'm just painting that silver. And with the same silver paint, I'm also going to add in the little dots between all of the frets, or maybe the dots are the frets. I'm not really sure, but that's what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go ahead and make the strings. So I just used some thread and painted it silver, and then I'm grabbing a thicker piece of wire. This is what all of the strings are going to be attached to. And basically what I'm doing is I'm going to be looping the thread around the wire and tying a knot. So right now I have 3 pieces of thread in total, but once I tie these around the wire, I'll end up with 6 strings, if that makes sense. I did watch a pretty good tutorial on how to make a 1/12 scale guitar, and I will link it below because it was very helpful, and obviously mine looks a little different from hers, but she did a really great job of explaining things. So if you do want to make your own 1/12 scale guitar, definitely check that video out. So as you can see, I knotted the first thread around the wire, and then I'm just repeating the process with the other ones. And once I have them all done, I'm just going to go ahead and glue this little wire at the base of the pickup, if that's what it's called. And then once that dries, we're going to go ahead and attach our strings to the tuners. This was probably the most tedious part because everything is very small, so I'll do my best to explain it. But basically, I'm going to be grabbing each of the strings one at a time, and I'm looping it around the tuner at the top. And I think I ended up looping each one around the tuner like maybe 2 or 3 times, and I just added a little bit of super glue just to hold it in place. And I'm just going to go ahead and repeat the process with the other strings. And in doing this, I realized that my tuners weren't exactly even because the strings end up a little bit wonky, but it's all good. And then after I loop them all and the glue dries, I can go ahead and cut off the excess at the top. And to make the whammy bar, I just used a thicker piece of wire, bent it a little, and I added a little bit of hot glue to the tip of it and painted it black. And now I'm just going to glue it to the front of the guitar. Before I added the strings, I drilled a tiny hole that I could just pop this right into. And now our guitar is complete. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It's definitely not perfect, but not bad for my first time making a guitar. And I can't wait to add it into the project. So stay tuned for part 4.